Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Can I ask, I mean, you're obviously right in the thick of these negotiations. Just give us, first of all, a kind of update on where you've got to mid-January.
Well, it's hard work, but the areas I've identified are the things that actually drive us up the wall about Europe that we need to deal with. Let's make sure we're not part of an ever closer union. I think we're on the way to getting that fixed. The idea that Europe must add to our competitiveness, not take away from our competitiveness. Making sure this isn't just a single currency club, but it's flexible enough for countries like Britain with our own currency. And then dealing with this issue of the abuse of free movement and the pressure of migration from the EU onto Britain by amending welfare rules. You know, it's hard work. I'm hopeful of a deal in February, and if we do that, we can go ahead and hold the referendum. But I think really here, there is a huge prize for Britain. If we can deal with the things that drive us up the wall about Europe, we can get the best of both worlds and actually secure our economic future inside this valuable market, and also help to keep our people safe by staying together with our close allies and partners as we confront extremism and terrorism. So it's a massive prize for Britain if we can get this right.
But it sounds like you think you might get it wrapped up in February, which means we could get a summer referendum.
That is, that is what I'd like to see, is a deal in February and then a referendum that would follow. But, you're dealing with complex negotiations. I think some people think it's the migration bit that's the most difficult and the others are easy. Well, certainly migration is difficult, but the other areas are not simple and straightforward either. But my aim is clear. Best of both worlds for Britain, the massive prize of sorting out what frustrates us about Europe, but staying in a reformed Europe. And that prize is closer than it was, and I'm going to work round the clock to get that done.
And just to be clear, so people understand, if you don't get it wrapped up in February, because of all the timescale problems and the summer holidays in Scotland and so forth, we'd be looking at a referendum probably in September.
Or later. Look, I have to have this referendum by the end of 2017. That's now the law of the land. Last year before the election, you had people sitting on your sofa here saying it'll never happen, they'll never deliver the referendum. We've legislated for it. It must happen by the end of 2017. To me, the substance matters much more than the timing. So if I can't get the right deal in February, I'll wait and I'll keep going and keep plugging away, because this is such an important issue for the future of our country. And if we get it right, there's so much benefit that we could feel from that.
Turning to the substance then, this idea of a 4-year ban on European workers coming into this country before they can take in-work benefits. That was in the manifesto. It's been very important to you. It's still on the table, I understand. Yes. But Mr. Tusk and many others say the problem is it's illegal under European law. François Hollande and I think Angela Merkel have both suggested a 3-year delay rather than a 4-year delay. I don't quite understand the difference, but is that something that's possible?
Well, there are a lot of suggestions being made. My position is very clear. The 4 years remain on the table until I can see something equally powerful and meaningful, because it's the goal that matters to me, which is at the moment our welfare system acts as a sort of extra additional, almost unnatural draw for people to come to Britain, and we need to be able to address that. We have a welfare system, unlike many in Europe, that you have instant access to, and it's that creates the difficulties. So I'm in the middle of a negotiation. I can't give a running commentary on it, but I'm confident we can get a good outcome.
At the risk of getting the same answer the Poles are saying at the moment, it's the Polish foreign minister, I can't pronounce his name, I suspect neither can you, but what he says is if Britain supports Poland in getting more NATO troops into Poland, possibly British troops, because he's very worried about Vladimir Putin, then that might be a kind of quid pro quo to allow Poland to back us.
All I can say, I read a lot of things in the newspapers that look like very interesting and possibly worthwhile suggestions, but I don't always recognise what they are. I mean, it's true that Britain supports having NATO troops in Poland. In fact, British troops exercise regularly in Poland, and we're going to see an increase in that. But no, what needs to be done here is a difficult, tough discussion about that combination of free movement and welfare to get a good deal for Britain, something equally powerful to the 4 years, or indeed the 4 years itself.
So you sound very sympathetic to the Poles on that. Is that in any way linked to our negotiations?
It's certainly not in any conversation. In the conversations I've had, that hasn't been the case. We talked about all issues when I've made several visits to Poland. But as I say, some of the things I read in the papers don't absolutely come in line with what my own experience is.
It's also been suggested, Prime Minister, that because of EU legality, one way round the 4-year problem would be that British workers could lose benefits, which would seem very bizarre indeed. Is that a possibility?
Well, my whole aim is to make sure that the unnatural draw of the UK welfare system, the problem I'm trying to address is that, to give you some figures, 60% of those who come from the EU to work in Britain are actually job seekers. They don't have a job when they arrive. Some 40% of them then get, serious support through the welfare system for the jobs that they do. Sometimes we're adding, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 pounds to their income.
To deal with that, to ensure there isn't discrimination between EU citizens, which is the legal problem, we might have to remove benefits for 4 years from British workers.
Again, I'm afraid I'm in the middle of a negotiation. I've got hard work to do, and when I've got an announcement to make, I'll make it.
Okay, your critics in the party say all of this, in the end, it's actually smoke and mirrors, it's camouflage. David Cameron is determined that we'll stay in the EU, almost under any circumstances, and he's determined to lead the in campaign when it comes.
Well, I'm determined to fulfil what we put in our manifesto, which is the renegotiation, the referendum. I think the best answer for Britain is staying in a reformed European Union if we can get those changes. But as I've said before, happy to say again, if we don't get them, I rule nothing out. And by saying nothing out, I absolutely mean that.
They sort of don't believe you, though, do they?
Well, they don't. Not everyone sits with me in those negotiations. I've been to 42 European councils since being Prime Minister. I think I know what can be delivered, what can't be delivered. I feel we have got, it's a very substantial, if you stop and ask people, what is it that bugs you about Europe? A lot of people would say, well, I do feel it's too much of a political union. I say, let's get out of that. People would say, well, are we more competitive in Europe or less? I'm saying we've got to fix this. Europe should be signing the trade deals with the fast-growing parts of the world, completing the single market, making sure regulations come down rather than go up. These things are the sorts of things people actually want fixed in Europe. And if they were easy to fix, believe me, I would have fixed them by now.
Coming out of Europe would be a huge thing for us, massive, massive problem. So if this is a genuinely open question, presumably we have plans as the government about what would happen if Brexit occurs.
Yeah, we have plans for our renegotiation, referendum, and then, of course,
and then the possibility of leaving?
Then the British public will make their decision, and we must obey that decision, whatever it is. That is the nature of a referendum. It's for those
Are you, as a government, prepared for the possibility of us leaving the EU?
Well, I don't think that is the right answer for the reasons I've given. But were that to be the answer, we would have to do everything necessary to make that work. This is, we put it in the manifesto. It's the public that will decide this, not the politicians.
Are the civil service working on a contingency for this?
The civil service are working round the clock to support my renegotiation.
The answer is no, I suspect. And ministers are not allowed to work on the contingency for Brexit, which suggests to a lot of people inside the machine that there is no expectation that we will leave the EU.
No, look,
that it is smoke and mirrors.
No, it's not smoke and mirrors because there's a very serious negotiation agenda. This is not simple or easy. All of the 4 areas I'm talking about, whether it's sovereignty, whether it's the strength of national parliaments, whether it's adding to Europe's competitiveness, whether it's dealing with migration, all of those are difficult. And the civil service is working to help me deliver those things. Now, if we fail to deliver them and we have to take a different stance, then that's a new situation. But I'm clear in politics what my goal is.
Sure.
My goal is renegotiation, referendum, secure Britain's place in a reformed European Union.
Will the British Parliament be sovereign after these negotiations?
Yes, the British Parliament is sovereign now. Actually, we made that clear in a bill in 2010, that if the British Parliament wants to alter its arrangements, it can. I mean, the British Constitution, as I was taught, can be summed up in 8 words. What the Queen enacts in Parliament is law. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, whether we're in the EU or out of the EU, that is absolutely crucial. If we need to reaffirm that even more, if we need to put it up in lights, happy to do so, because I think it is important. I often say to my European colleagues, Britain is not, difficult or prickly about these matters. We're just immensely proud of our long history of strong democratic institutions, and we join Europe for trade, for cooperation, for working together. We do not want to bury ourselves in some sort of European superstate. And that is why already, Britain's not in the single currency. We're not in the Schengen no borders system. We'll never sign up to a European army. These things are important for people to know.
Absolutely.
There is a very strong patriotic case for engagement in the, on the continent of Europe from a British perspective.
We have talked about this quite a lot. We talked about this a year ago, and a year ago I said to you, what about cabinet ministers who take a different line? And you were very clear. You said, no, collective responsibility. I can remind you what you said.
I've looked very carefully at what I said a year ago, and what I said, I was on your programme actually only as recently as October, and I said in October the decision about collective responsibility would be taken at the conclusion of the negotiation. Well, I hope we're close to that, and that's why I've said what the decision will be. And frankly, Andrew, that has always been my intention. You can't ask people who have, very long-standing, held and sincere views to campaign in a different way. And so that's what will happen. There
are people in your cabinet, I think, who will vote to leave whatever happens, a few of them. And there are other people who are waiting to see the results of the negotiations. How much does it matter to you that you win over the majority of the cabinet to your negotiating?
Obviously, I want to have...
so you need to have Theresa May.
I want to have as many people supporting the side that I'm on, whichever side that is, when the time comes as possible. And let me make this clear, because I think it's important. The government's not going to be sort of neutral about this issue. With people on one side or on the other. My intention is that the conclusion of the negotiation, the Cabinet has a discussion and reaches a clear recommendation to the British people of what we should do. I hope that will be staying in a reformed European Union, because I will have got a good negotiation for Britain. And at that point, a clear government position that I'm saying, members of the Cabinet, ministers who have long-standing, held views on a different basis, they'll be able to campaign in a personal capacity.
And then come back again afterwards?
Of course, yes, absolutely. No, they won't leave, as it were. They will remain ministers, but they will, very much as happened on previous occasions.
You may have heard Tim Montgomery earlier on. Some people are concerned that at the moment it's okay if you're in the Cabinet to come out, as Philip Hammond did, and say, these are the reasons why we want to stay in Europe. But it's not okay to come out and say, these are the reasons why we want to get out of Europe. So in a sense, people who are pro your position are unable to speak. People who are against your position are still muzzled until the negotiations are over.
I think it's a wrong premise to the question, in a way. It's not my position. It's the position of the whole government.
But nonetheless, Ian Duncan Smith can't come into that chair and make his case for leaving the EU, if that's what he believes, without risking his cabinet position.
Because the position of the whole government is that we should renegotiate, hold a referendum, and that the best outcome would be to keep Britain in a reformed European Union. That is the position of the government. So anyone sitting in this chair from my team should be making that argument. But at the point at which we've completed the negotiation, people who take a different view will be able to do so. I think that is fair, sensible, reasonable. It's very much what happened in the past, and I think it's...
this is all...
and obviously at the end of the referendum, the Conservative Party has to come back together, and so it's very important these discussions will be conducted in a reasonable way.
This is a very, very important matter.